So thanks everybody. Thanks for coming to our February 2025 garden talk. Today we've got Denise Knoll, who's a master gardener, Genesee County Master Gardener. She's going to be talking about the right plant, right place to help everyone figure out what you should be growing in your garden. Go ahead, Denise.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Denise Knoll. I've been a master gardener for about 5 years. I'm involved in a couple other programs through the extensions for the forest owner program as well as the naturalist. And right now I'm in school for environmental science and I'm taking soil class right now. So some of this information has come from there from what I'm learning. So we're going to start out with the basics, talking about our soil, because when you talk about putting your right plant in your right place, you're going to want to know about your soil and how to take care of that soil so it can feed your plants the way you want them to. Okay, soil is a complex mixture of weathered rock and mineral particles. The living organisms of the soil food web and decaying remains of plants, animals, and microorganisms. Soil is a dynamic volume that varies depending on the intersection between soils and voids. And as you see here on the picture, you see kind of some wearing. The soil is really light colored. That's where some of it's been depleted. The nice brown at the top is your topsoil. We're going to go into the horizons a little bit more. But in there, you have about half air and half water because you're going to want your water to stick to your soil. And a lot of this is through chemistry and different biological means we won't get into. But you want that water to stick to the soil so that it can absorb into your plants because it does also with that with nutrients as it flows through. So your mineral particles, your sand, silt, and your clay are all your different layers, and some soils are sandier than say ours. Ours are more clay and silt in Genesee County. But you have the organic layer, which is your living and previously living, where you break down. We'll talk more about that. And then, of course, what we just talked about with the water and the air. But you might not think there's a lot of air in your soil, but there really is. All your little critters, we'll talk about more, that move through your soil. When water makes paths through the soil, it allows for air, and it has a lot to do with induction as far as gravity pulling the water down and then transferring, making room for the water to move through the soil. Okay, our garden topsoil, that's some of our critical nutrients that we want for our garden. Ideal garden topsoil is typically 45% mineral particles, 25% air and water. Well, 50% for both of those, and then 5% organic matter. But you can see up in this graph here, it breaks it down a little bit more as far as what's in your soil. So what do you mean by ideal soil? Soil that will support the growth of our commonly desired vegetable and ornamental or other plants that we want to put in the ground. And this picture here just shows a little bit of the particle size between your sand, your silt, and your soil. And with some of the other grains, how water might filtrate through a little bit quicker. Soil development. So weathering creates soil materials, and it takes a long time to form these soils. So we need to take care of what we have. So soils come from parent rock originally. So through erosion and freezing and thawing, you get a lot of your rocks breaking up and becoming part of your soil, as well as you have dust particles from other areas. When plants break down, root systems break down, that makes that nice humus, that nice dark soil on top. Some of this acronym here at the bottom, the CLORPT, which breaks it down. So a lot of it deals with your climate, your organisms, organic materials that are breaking down, relief, which is your topography. So if you have high hills or low valleys, a lot of that sediment and that soil may move to different areas. Your parent material, that's your rocks. Ours is really unique because we were prior glacial areas. The glaciers have moved the soil as well as ground up a lot of the parent material, the stone, and as well over time. It takes thousands, hundreds upon thousands of years to create soil. And a lot of ours that we have deep in our ground have been there since the glaciers has built up from the parent rock. Since the glaciers moved through, which I think was about 12,000 years ago. Okay, soil profile, this kind of breaks down a little bit. And this kind of just gives you a little snapshot, gives you the distance between this graph, but all different soils have, some are different. Some of your topsoil might be a little deeper and thicker, especially if it's undisturbed. And your B horizon, your subsoil, for some areas, they might actually be a lot more, like 5 feet, 6 feet depth. So the smaller picture gives a little bit of breakdown as far as the names of them. You'll see is the parent rock, and that's where you start getting into more of your bedrock. So a lot of times when you build, you want to have, your supports down into the bedrock to make sure that you have a sturdy foundation and stuff. So you have all your soil structure below. And this is really important to kind of understand how these soils layer, because in the middle here is a lot of aggregates. So when you till and you till heavily, it breaks up those aggregates where all that air and that water get through, that you want to not disturb that. That's why you'll see a lot more is going to no tilling. Because it keeps those aggregates intact, because that's where all your nutrients and your minerals stay to feed your roots. Because as you can see, that's where your roots are growing into. Right from your O to your B zone is typically dependent on what you're growing and how big your root systems are. They're going to get their nutrients from. Okay, and this is just to give you some perspective of the size of the sand compared to the silt and the clay. I took a soil sample, and you'll see in the back of the room after we're done, you can look at it a little bit more. It was the water jar sample. So I took about 2 feet into my soil, which was pretty soft still. I was kind of surprised it wasn't frozen. But then I shook up quite a bit of it in a jar of water, and then it layers it out as far as the thicker particles to the silt, and then you can see a little bit of the clay in there. But it gives you an idea as far as the size of the particles, as well as you can feel your soil and the different textures to kind of tell what you have. Okay, and in the end, when we talk a little bit more about the jar sample, it'll give you an idea. There's a triangle that you can actually go through to place what kind of soils you have. And stuff comes into great importance when we start looking at what you want to plant where, because different plants, don't like clay. Some plants don't mind it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then looking a little bit closer into your soil components, you have, this is a little bit more of a graphic showing what it may look like in your soil. So the organic matter, I'm sorry, consists of dead, decaying plant and animal materials, as well as it's, of course, critical for your garden success. It improves the soil physical structure and improves the soil water holding capacity and aeration, and slowly releases plant nutrients. So a lot of that chemistry and biology is going through between the plant photosynthesis is releasing things out to the roots into the soil, as well as things are being absorbed from the plant roots. And we'll get into the food web. So when you think about your plants and your soil is alive. There's a lot of microorganisms. They say a teaspoon of soil has more organisms in it than there are humans on this planet. That there is such a vast, that they haven't discovered everything that's doing their part as far as making our soil healthy, being able to feed the plants. So the food web is really important. So when you think about whatever you're putting on your soil, you know, you put vinegar or something like that, you're destroying a lot of that microbiology that's going on in your soil. There's good and bad nematodes that a lot of us have experienced, a lot of good and bad bacteria, but our plants need that stuff in order to provide the right nutrients. And so when we're, in a way of thinking of it is, some of these crops, when we go to the grocery store, you know, we buy certain things that we can't get in the season. So these lands that are really tilled, so, and they're fertilized, and there's there may be pesticides or herbicides and stuff mixed in there. So those are taking up nutrients of poured on fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. But if you think about your backyard, if you're protecting your soil, you're doing your cover crops, you put your cover crops in, and then you lay them down and you build your rows and you put your straw or your mulch, and you're building that soil up, you're going to have less erosion. You're going to have a lot more microbiology going on in your soil. Your vegetables are going to be a lot healthier for you. You're going to get a lot more nutrients out of those vegetables. And that's where you see a lot of farmers are switching their gears. In fact, there's a good one, a video, if you get the chance to watch, is Gabe Brown. He's the Building Healthy Soil. He's a farmer out in the Midwest, and he's actually taken areas of his cropland and is doing a lot of this testing out there. And these packets will be in the back for you guys to look at, take pictures and stuff of, as well. But he's taken areas where he's put in the cover crops, he's done the mulching, and he is getting the same, if not better, yield as the areas that he was actually doing with tillage and for added fertilizers. So he, through his testing, is not seeing any difference or decline in the production of his crops. And, you know, West, they do corn and wheat and everything as well. So protecting our microorganisms, you know, even though sometimes we don't like to see ants in our garden, they're making those little air tunnels through our soil to make sure that water and the right nutrients and the stuff that is breaking down from the old cover crops and stuff can feed all those microorganisms. And this gives you a little more perspective of the amount of microorganisms that are in your soils. And I have a little bit more here. Okay, so some of this is from research out in Zurich. And the highest portion of species living in soil is fungi. 90% of them live there. It's followed by plants and roots with 86%. Earthworms and mollusks such as snails make up 20%. However, no one has attempted to estimate the diversity of these very small organisms such as bacteria, virus, fungi, and unicellular organisms, according to Mark Anthony, who is from the University of Zurich. Okay, so it's really important that we do what we can to protect these, because this is only going to help our ornamental or our plants around our house, but as well as make sure that our gardens are have all the nutrients and the best food that they can have to grow. Because there's a lot of communication. The fungi, they don't enter the cells in the plant roots, but they do connect and they do communicate. So there are things that the fungi feed the roots, and then there's things that the roots feed the fungi. And so when we disturb that soil down there, we completely break that connection. Okay. Okay, switching gears a little bit more soil components with water and soil. Of course, it creates pore spaces between minerals and organic compounds, account for 50% of the total volume. Air and water are essential for growth and health of the plants and soil microbes. And water is responsible for plant rigidity, so holding those roots into place. So if we have compacted tilled soil, 9 out of 10 times we're not going to have the absorption that you would normally have. You've probably seen fields that have been beat down pretty good with compaction. The water just runs off, goes off to the side streams, and then meets out to the rivers. But when you have good soil that has that good humus, it's going to absorb that water, take its time to go down to the water table, to the water system, and be able to feed those plants. From some of the research we've been talking about in class is plants do better when the water is from the bottom. When it actually, not that we water it from the top, but that rain comes in, the water table builds up, and that's usually the best way that plants, our trees, everything like to be fed is from the bottom. And I know some of you probably have experience with the tiles and stuff out into the crop fields, which is good because it takes off some of that excess water, but it comes up. So the tiles aren't completely at the bottom, but the water comes up, takes off that excess, but still allows the plants to get the water and the nutrients. So for some of the farm fields. Okay, and a little bit more about the soils differ in capacity. So we're looking at sandy soils, the loam, silty stuff, as well as the clay soils, how water works its way and penetrates. So that's what helps, as well as that nice humus helps that absorb and helps it drain through. Okay, and porosity, measure of the pore space volume of a given soil is essential for movement. Sandy soils are large pore spaces and promotes rapid drainage. So that humus helps as well with holding on to that water. Soils heavy in clay contain tiny pore spaces, as we've seen, and then increasing the organic matter increases your soil's water holding capacity. Okay, and this is just talking about a little more, getting a little more local to our area, but scientists identified 70,000 kinds of soil in the US and many different combinations of minerals, but your main ones, then they're all connected, whether there's sand, soil, or sand, silt, or clay, with various amounts of organic material. So New York is pretty diverse, 300 different types of soils, and Honey Eye is the state soil. Honey Eye can't be found in any other state. This is unique to New York State. And it's typically, of course, up in the north of the Finger Lakes region. You'll see some of this. But here we have our top soils for Genesee County with the different percentages, as well as their parent materials, limestone, sandstone, and shale for most part of these, except when you get down to the Madeline. And then we're talking about a little more glacial deposits, some more clay type. And the other ones drained fairly well. The other soils do, except for this Madeline, because it's a little more clay, so it doesn't drain as well. USDA has the Web Soil Survey program. And this you can plug into your specific property and to look at specifically what your soil types are. And when you bring up the soil map, it actually gives you the breakdown with all the specific information on those specific soils. So if you want to see how the drainage is, what the hills, the slopes, all the particulars they have on the Web Soil Survey. And if you have problems trying to find stuff, whether it's on the Web Soil Survey, USDA product, there's also the county mapping system for your land. There's a soil clicker that you can tab onto, and that actually breaks up. It shows you they're similar to contour lines, but it shows you where the different soils are as well. And if you need any assistance with that, we're here to help you. So the role for soils in gardens and landscapes, of course, it absorbs rainfall, mitigates flooding. removes pollutants and cleanses the water. It stores water for plants and wildlife. It provides nutrients and oxygen. And it provides habitat for a variety of microbes, plant and animals, which we talked about. And it's very much an anchoring component. Okay, the condition of your soil, depending on your soil type, the right plant for the right place. Your plant will be able to be more productive in your gardens and successful in your landscapes by understanding your soil. Okay, so don't be afraid to dig up a little chunk, do a little water test, kind of see what you have in those certain areas. Understand what kind of soil you have, because I was going to grab it. Does that Soil and Water in Genesee County sends out in the spring, a plant purchase list every year. And so this year I was going through and I was looking at, my husband wants to do some pine trees. So we have some areas in the back. And so I was thinking, oh yeah, great. I'll pick out some pretty pine trees so that he can grow them. And well, coming to find out, the two that I was looking at don't like flat clay land, and that's what that area I was looking at. So I had to recalculate on where I wanted to put these trees so that he could still groom them and harvest them to be able for them to be productive and nice looking. And what's nice is on that list is they do give you quite a bit of information, whether it's native, what type of soil it likes, whether it's full sun or partial sun. So when you're getting ready, and we'll go into a little more specifics, is really knowing with the plants that you want to put in, what kind of soil you have, and if they'll be able to have the amount of drainage. Some like more wet roots than others, some like drier roots. So that's going to be critical in knowing what's around your property. And something else to keep in mind, we go to Wegmans in Pew. And so on William Street, they're putting in a new development. And they took down, it must have been probably about 3 feet of soil, and it's all scraped up into piles before they're getting ready to put these houses in. So all that topsoil has completely been destroyed, completely put in the piles. So probably what they'll do is they'll build the house, do their foundations, and then move the soil back in. So if you live in some place that might be fairly new, this might be your soil around your foundation or around the edges of your property that you might want to be aware of, that you've got a little extra work to do to rebuild those soils, to kind of bring those back so that you are able to get those nutrients into your roots and everything that you're going to need. So in that, talking about plants don't adapt well to different sites if they're prone to stress, pests, and disease. And so a lot of us have experience with this. Some of the plants that we pick, they're very prone to some of the pests that are bugging us, whether it's Japanese beetles or like some, of course, the ash borers that are come around. There's very little we can do there. But there's other trees and plants that you can find that are a little more resistant to critters and diseases, that might be worth doing a little more research to seeing what is best in replacement for those locations you want to put them. But of course, our climate, and climate is over a long period of time, about 30 years. It's not what the weather was last year, because this year it might be a little bit different. But are you full sun? Are you partial? And what kind of plants are you looking for? Is something flowers all the time or not? And then wind, whether you have wind protection, because sometimes we get those really bad windstorms up here, that you want to have something that's going to have a little protection, but still gets the light that it needs. Soil compaction and drainage. So if this is an area that you're looking at and it has you drive your side by side through all the time, and it's going to have compacted, like oaks. Oaks do not like their roots compacted at all. And certain other types of plants don't like any type of compacted soil. So just you keep in mind of where you're going to be running equipment through or walking through all the time as far as placement for those plants. Soil texture, pH. pH is important, and I'll show you a pretty picture here in a minute. But that's vital. It's vital because if you're too acidic or you're too alkaline, your plant's not going to thrive. You're not going to get it to come to its full beauty that you would want it to. Same thing with our vegetables. Certain vegetables only like to grow in certain types of pH. We still do testing here, so if you have any questions about your soil pH or what you have, please let us know. As well as slopes and access to water. So if you're putting something that likes a little more water on the top of a slope or you got a hill, you might have a little bit of irrigation water problems. And then if it's something you're going to have to water for a couple years, you're going to want to have easy access to water so you're not dragging buckets, or if that's not an issue, just so you know how much water it's going to need. And then here's a diagram that is excellent, kind of giving you a little more breakdown of what plants like for soil pH. So you have your parameters of 2 through 11. Plants really seem to like 5 through maybe 8-ish, but mostly 7. Okay. Causes for acidity is high rainfall, acidic rain, fertilizers, and weathering of oxidation. Okay, and then some causes of more alkaline is drought, weathering, and high concentration of some of your critical components, some of your more salt and other minerals. And you can see some of the minerals down at the bottom. Okay, magnesium and your calcium. Okay. Okay, moving into site assessment a little bit more. Your basic environmental factors, what kind of obstructions you might have below or above ground. So if you have a window or you have one of those windows that bay out, different slopes, wildlife interference, if you've got a lot of chipmunks or deer that like to come and nibble on your trees, existing trees that are already in the area, they might there might be other issues other than just shade. Human interactions, as well as, like what we talked about with construction, pathways, compacting soil, and different chemicals or other management practices. Some basic environmental factors. What's the vegetation that's there now? What's it doing? Are the plants in good condition? What can you learn about the weeds? So it just gives an example. Mosses and plantains, they grow in compacted soil. That might be a good indicator of what's already growing there. If you might have other issues that you have to solve before you decide to plant something else. When I was in North Carolina, this was a common occurrence. This is a holly bush tree. And some of it wasn't always the property owners, it was the developer. And they just put in what they want and not really realizing what kind of effect it's going to have on the house. But you have to take in effect of foundation. There's certain trees and plants that don't need to be anywhere near your foundation, or you'll have other issues later. Or you've got thorny, ouchy trees like this that to prune them all the time to keep them under control so they look nice closer to your house. Those are the kind of things you want to keep in mind when trying to decide how you want to beautify that curb appeal, or if you're rebuilding, regenerating your forest or whatever you might be looking at. But you will be able to have more productive gardens and successful landscape plannings by understanding your site, by selecting the right plant or variety, recommend a variety for your location, adequate nutrients and water based on your plant needs, and avoiding practices that cause compaction and erosion, and improving poor drainage. So soaker hoses are always wonderful, for areas that need a little bit more water, putting that mulch and that compost over top, composting every year, because those microorganisms, once they eat up all that material, they're going to want more. So seasonally going through and using good humus compost to feed those microorganisms, just lay them on top, put your mulch on top and your soaker hoses in there. If you use barrels or you have to hook it up to a spout, is always helpful. With the right plant for the right place concept in mind and considering soil properties and site assessment. What do you do to your soil? What have you done to your soil in the past and why? And has your perspective shifted? There's a lot of wonderful material out, and I have some more pamphlets here if you want to take a look at after the class. This one from UMass Extension Landscape is wonderful because it tells you what kind of, if you have wet soil, dry soil, and it actually has native plant recommendations for the type of soil that you have. So there's wonderful resources and information out there from different extensions that can help you with the questions, or you can give us a call and we can help you out. So at home, some things to look at to help you figure out for the right plant for the right place when you're doing your plan. And it's very important that you do your plan. Sometimes we go to the nursery and we see this beautiful plant with these flowers and we start looking at it. It's like, I gotta have this plant, right? Well, take out your phone and start looking and see if you can incorporate that, because if you find a plant that fits your location around your house and your soil, you're going to have less maintenance in the long run. But if you find something that's a little more exotic, it's going to need a lot more work and it's going to need a lot more loving and probably soil amendments that you may not want to be putting in your soil. So just some things to think about, but of course, soil pH is really important, no matter if you're doing a garden or you're planting along the edge of your house, or you're looking at regenerating your forest. And that's one of the wonderful things is Cornell does have, and I've seen some other stuff online. If you're regenerating some of your forest lines, they can really tell you what works best next to the other trees that you already have growing and the other plants that are there, because that kind of gives you a big indicator, especially in your woodlands, as far as what's already there and what will grow really good with it as far as the native plants. Your jar test, I have a sample back there. You know, you dig down a couple feet, compact as much into a jar, fill it up with water and give her a really good shake. Let her set for a few days, and then you'll have a good idea of how your soil is broken up. Okay, and then with that is the triangle. So online it has the video and it really breaks down how you measure it. And then each side is a different, whether it's soil or it's clay, sand, and silt. And they'll give you a percentage and then they'll break it down, whether it's sandy loam or the specifics a little bit more. And these you can find online real easy to give you an idea so you can find out what exactly your soil is. Soil texture, by feeling a lot of your different soils, you can tell whether it's a clay, it's really slimy, or if it's a little more sandier and it falls apart. Soil systems thinking, again, going back to all those microorganisms talking to each other, the roots communicating with all that network that's underneath, and then not having monocultures, but having a variety of different plants so that they all work together and help feed each other. So systems is more of the whole environment, the big picture, not just focusing on that single tree or plant that you're getting ready to plant, but everything that's around it and how it's all going to work together. And of course, you want to start with kind of a sketch for your property and where your big, whether it's cement or asphalt, when you have a lot of rain coming off your cement, it might cause a little more alkaline along the edges of your cement because of the materials that maybe, slowly, we don't see it, but that slowly erode away. Or if you have septic lines in some places or buried power lines, you want to know where that is to keep that stuff in mind. Which is some tools for you to do at home to think about when you're looking at replanting or even adding one plant into your new, your network of exterior plants or your garden. And then we have our references. So this program was developed much earlier by Fiona Doherty, and we had some other people with putting in inputs, but Jan and I renewed it this year. So we've updated it with a more current Genesee County and some other information. And so that's all I have right now.
You can stop sharing.
Okay.
All right, so I bet you guys weren't expecting a
Class on soils
Oh,
today.
gotcha.
But really, soils is the building block for your garden. So if you don't know what kind of soil you have, or what your texture is, or how your drainage is, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail, especially in like a vegetable garden, as Denise said. It's very important when you're choosing plants.
plants.
So having that basic understanding of your soils, and if you need to, improve your soils, if you have a lot of clay or a lot of sand.
Organic matter can always do that.
And then the site assessment of just kind of going around and looking and seeing what you have. So for you Zoom folks, I do have a handout of all of Denise's references, and I will email that out to all of you this afternoon. So that you have her references and the links that were in the references. Is any